Gaeltacht, Richard Boyd Barrett.
Minister, you may be aware that my committee, the Budget Scrutiny Committee, has been looking at Section 481 film relief, the relief that goes to film producer companies to make films, which in return they're supposed to give quality employment and training and comply with all relevant legislation. And you may have heard, for example, Equity say that they are being forced to waive their rights to intellectual property, to royalties and so on, and the equitable remuneration they're entitled to. And we've heard film crew saying that they're not having their rights vindicated under a whole series of employment legislation. How would you respond to these concerns?
Thank you, Deputy, for raising the film industry in the week that's in it, and it's an opportunity to congratulate Irish people today on their Oscar nominations. The annual global spotlight on the Oscars is also shining now on Ireland's culture, on our beautiful scenery, and most particularly on our creative talent. And I'm sure the House will join me in congratulating the cast and crew of those who support on Colleen Kuhn and the Banshees of Inisherin. These include Colin Barrett and the team, Kerry Condon, Colin Farrell, Brendan Gleeson, Barry Keoghan and Martin McDonagh. And I also congratulate other Irish nominees, Paul Mescal, Richard Banham and Jonathan Redmond, on their nominations. It's a pleasure to be able to name so many Irish people who are making their mark on a global stage. Success breeds success, and Ireland is a more attractive location for filmmaking as a result. I understand that the Deputy is referring to matters raised at the Committee on Budgetary Oversight examinations of Section 481, and I am aware that the Committee has taken evidence from many witnesses and organisations, as well as from officials of my own department. And as I understand, there were many different views expressed to the Committee, with most witnesses underlining the crucial importance of Section 481 to the Irish audiovisual industry and to Ireland. I respect and I am indeed passionate about the rights of workers, but as I have said before, this does not fall to my department. Employment law is the responsibility of my colleague, the Minister for Enterprise, Trade and Employment, as are the mechanisms for dealing with disputes, the Workplace Relations Commission and the Labour Court, and these are the appropriate avenues for complaints relating to employment law. I would suggest also that if you are aware of wrongdoing, to please bring it to the WRC. I understand that the intellectual property issue raised by Equity focuses on the question of whether residuals are or are not paid. This is, of course, a matter for consideration by the members of Equity in conjunction with SIPTU, and if they so decide, they can enter into negotiation with the organisations and companies that engage them. Finally, I would just like to bring to attention to the House that our Oscar-nominated films were made during COVID, and I think they should be applauded for this. Every one of the cast and crew of the films worked under such difficult, restrictive protocols at all times during the production. I'm so proud of our film industry today.
Minister, we all obviously share in the celebrations for the success of the Banshees of Inisherin and Colleen Kuhn, but that success, which results from the performances, the writing, the directing and so on, and the crew, of course, who stand behind the camera, underlines the need to guarantee and vindicate and champion the rights of performers, writers, actors and the crew who make the films. Not to pass the buck, as you have essentially just done, because those films and all other films in this country are funded with public money and requirements that we get quality employment and training, and that things like the intellectual property rights of writers and performers and so on are actually guaranteed. Now, Equity have made it absolutely clear that they are being forced to waive their intellectual property rights, which is in breach of the Copyright Directive and the legislation. Film crew have pointed out that, for example, their rights under the Fixed Term Workers Act are being absolutely ignored and abused by film producer companies that in receipt of large amounts of public money.
Minister to respond.
Just to say, it's a case of, I'm just stating fact that employment law is the responsibility of my colleague, the Minister for Enterprise, Trade and Employment, as are the mechanisms for dealing with disputes. But in relation to protecting workers, in 2019 there were significant changes made to the Section 481 and how it operated. There is an increased emphasis on upskilling and lifelong learning and much greater scrutiny, and I hope that these changes would ensure that any historical allegations of malpractice prior to 2019 are not repeated in today's today's audiovisual industry. In addition to those changes, the Safe to Create programme that I launched in October provides for a dignity at work framework where all workers should have the right to expect a workplace free from bullying, harassment, humiliation, intimidation, victimisation and any other negative behaviours. And I know that Screen Producers Ireland would strongly refute any claims of blacklisting in the Irish film industry, and SPI can demonstrate their commitment to their relationship with the unions and are doing additional work in the areas of skills development and training. So, we are doing whatever we can do, Deputy, to protect workers' rights.
Minister, Equity again and again, I talked to them this morning, have made it clear they are being forced to waive their rights to intellectual property and to sign contracts which say they are getting equitable remuneration when they are not. Okay? They're being forced to. And I asked the President of Equity directly, I said, what happens if you don't sign the contract? You don't get the job. Right? Have, for example, Metropolitan Films, on the question of, the declaration requirement that they indicate to you any legal issues or Labour Court issues, have they informed, as they were required to do, the Minister that they had a finding against them in the Labour Court over a breach of collective agreement with film crew? Have some of the other film producer companies indicated that there are cases going to the High Court at the moment over arising from cases in the Labour Court where companies in receipt of Section 481 didn't even bother to turn up to cases where they were named as having been in breach of legislation?
Thank you,
I mean, is the Minister aware of that kind of stuff?
Minister to respond.
Deputy, just to say I'm happy to engage with you because I am aware I only have a minute here to respond, but I'm happy to engage with you after this as well if you want to bring further issues to my attention. But I'm just saying in the application process for the certification under Section 481, a producer company and a qualifying company, as defined by the Taxes Consolidation Act 1997, are required to sign an undertaking in respect of quality employment and must, as a condition of certification, provide details of any workplace commission decisions in relation to qualifying company, the producer company or other companies in the film group, and where those decisions are a finding against such a company, confirmation that the finding has been followed or an explanation where the finding has not been followed. In relation to the copyright, I'd like to repeat that the buyout of contracts relating to intellectual property rights, as well as copyright issues in general, falls under the remit of my colleague, the Minister for Enterprise, Trade and Employment. And as I said earlier, I am aware that some witnesses in that committee expressed a view that there should be an agreement between employers and workers in Ireland of if and when residual payment could or should be paid, but any general agreement on the payment arrangement for actors and whether or not it includes residuals is first and foremost a matter for the trade unions, their members, and thereafter dependent on its members' preferences, a matter for engagement with employer representatives. But I'm happy to engage with you afterwards, Deputy.